Welcome back to Vocabify English channel. Think about the last time you brushed your teeth. Did you actually think about the angle of the bristles or the temperature of the tap water or even the specific motion of your wrist?
I mean, probably not.
Right. You were completely on autopilot. We all are.
Yeah.
But today, we are going to show you how that exact, that mindless 90-second routine is actually the ultimate foundational tool for fluency in a new language.
It is entirely deceptive, honestly. We tend to view our daily routines as just chores to rush through, but linguistically speaking, they are absolute gold mines.
Exactly. So for today's deep dive, we're looking at a transcript of an A1 beginner's English lesson. It's from a YouTube channel called the Mr. English channel.
Right, the one with the two speakers.
Yeah, it features a conversation between Emily and Paul, and they basically just sit down and break down their daily habits, literally from sunrise to sunset.
Which sounds simple, but there's a lot there.
There really is. And for you listening right now, we want to frame this deep dive not just as a mechanical look at how someone learns English vocabulary.
Yeah, it's more than just memorization.
Totally. Think of it as a mirror. This transcript reflects the universal shared structure of human days. Because whether you live in Tokyo, Toronto, or Timbuktu, the scaffolding of your day probably looks incredibly similar to Emily and Paul's.
What's fascinating here is how mundane routines, things like, washing your face or making a cup of coffee, are actually the critical building blocks for mastering any new system of communication.
Right.
We often kind of trick ourselves into believing that we need to learn high-level philosophical concepts or, complex debate terminology to truly speak a language.
Like we have to be reading Shakespeare on day one.
Exactly. But the reality is quite the opposite. The foundation of fluency isn't built on abstract thought at all. It is built on the phrase, I get out of bed.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because I was reading through how Emily and Paul describe their mornings, and it really struck me. Morning routines are essentially like a computer's operating system booting up.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, in language learning, these very basic action verbs, wake up, wash, make, eat, they act as the base code.
Right, the absolute necessary foundation.
You absolutely have to load this base code before you can run any of the complex software of language, like those nuanced debates or deeply emotional conversations.
I love that operating system analogy. It fits perfectly. When you look at their morning sequence in the source material, the defining characteristic is its intense physicality.
Yeah, definitely.
Like Paul is the early bird waking up at 6:30 a.m. while Emily wakes up at 7 a.m.
A bit more reasonable, if you ask me.
I agree. But regardless of the time discrepancy, the sequence of physical actions they teach the listener is identical.
Right. They both explicitly highlight phrases like get out of bed, and then it's moving to the bathroom, washing their faces, and brushing their teeth. And I have to admit, when I first looked at this, I wondered, why does a beginner lesson focus so heavily on this instead of, say, travel survival phrases?
Oh, that's a very common question.
Because I always thought you'd want to start with, like, where's the train station? Or how much does this cost?
Right, but that is a very common misconception. Survival travel phrases are mostly about immediate transaction.
Okay.
But if your goal is actual fluency and acquisition, that physicality you just mentioned is the skeleton key.
The physicality of the morning routine.
Exactly. In cognitive science, there is this concept called embodied cognition.
Embodied cognition. What exactly is that?
Basically, it suggests that our understanding of language is deeply intertwined with our physical experiences.
Ah. Okay.
So when you are just starting to learn a language, abstract concepts are incredibly difficult to hold on to because there is nothing to anchor them to.
They just float away.
Exactly. But the shock of cold water when you wash your face, or the grip of the plastic handle when you brush your teeth, those are deeply ingrained visceral memories.
So by teaching those specific physical verbs first, Emily and Paul are essentially helping the learner bypass their native language.
That is exactly the goal. You are bridging the gap between abstract thought and concrete vocabulary.
Wow, okay.
You aren't translating the word water from your native tongue. You are actually feeling the water and attaching a brand new English label directly to that sensation.
That makes total sense. And it continues right into the kitchen in their lesson, too.
Right, the breakfast sequence.
Yeah, Emily talks about making her breakfast, which usually consists of coffee and toast.
The classic.
And she explicitly calls out adding a piece of fruit, like a banana or an apple.
Oh.
Whereas Paul is a tea and cereal kind of guy.
Very different vibes, but the same linguistic function.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Again, it's just that base code booting up. Make breakfast. Have coffee.
And again, it anchors the learner in the physical reality of their own kitchen. Think about the sensory input of making coffee.
Oh, yeah. The smell of the beans.
Right, the smell of the beans, the sound of the machine, the heat of the mug in your hands.
Yeah.
When a curriculum forces you to say, I make coffee, while you are physically performing that exact action, it hugely accelerates the neurological mapping.
Because you're living the word.
Exactly. You aren't just memorizing a list of foods on a whiteboard. You are attaching new linguistic labels to the exact objects you interact with every single morning.
Which brings us to the sort of the threshold of the day.
Getting ready to leave.
Right. Emily details the process of getting ready to leave, walking the listener through, putting on shoes, putting on a coat, and finally, leaving the house.
The big transition.
And once that physical boot up is complete, it feels like the entire nature of language fundamentally changes.
How so?
Well, we move from the solitary physical verbs of the morning to the much more collaborative, abstract verbs of the modern economy.
Ah, yes. The transition from the private self to the public self.
Yes, exactly. And let's look at how Emily and Paul's workday vocabulary reveals this shift. The source material contrasts the traditional commute with working from home.
Right, because Emily goes into an office.
Yeah, while Paul sometimes works from his house. And I have to push back a little on the lesson material here, or at least point out something that feels almost, I don't know, a bit dystopian.
Dystopian in an English lesson.
Yeah, because it is shockingly, almost comically uniform.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Like, whether you are a high-powered corporate executive or a teacher like Paul who is preparing language lessons, the physical reality of the workday they describe is mostly just sitting at a desk and working on a computer.
It is a bit bleak when you put it like that, but if we connect this to the bigger picture, that uniformity you were pointing out is exactly why these verbs are so exceptionally powerful for learners.
Really? How so?
Well, it might seem repetitive or even, as you said, a bit dystopian to reduce our professional lives to sitting at a desk.
Right.
But mastering this specific office vocabulary unlocks communication in almost any modern professional setting across the entire globe.
So it's less about the specific job you do and more about the universal language of the knowledge worker.
Precisely that. The modern economy has basically flattened the physical actions of work.
That's a good way to put it.
If you can confidently use phrases like answer emails, write reports, and have meetings, you can describe the core of your professional existence to a colleague in London, a client in Sydney, or a vendor in New York.
That's true. The intellectual nuances of the job might change dramatically, like an architect is doing something very different from an accountant.
Obviously.
But the foundational verbs of their daily routine, answering emails, having meetings, they do not change at all.
Exactly. I hadn't really considered that before, but it provides a massive return on investment for the beginner.
You learn 5 verbs, and suddenly you can talk to 90% of the corporate world.
Pretty much. And it extends beyond just the productive tasks, too.
Right.
The source material spends a good amount of time on the great equalizer of the workday, which is lunchtime.
Oh, they break this down really thoroughly.
They do.
Paul mentions having a sandwich or a salad, keeping it light. He talks about the dynamic of sometimes bringing lunch from home and sometimes going out to eat.
Yeah, the classic lunch dilemma.
Right, before just going back to work until the end of the day. It feels like a very deliberate choice to include these specific breaks in an A1 lesson.
It is highly deliberate. For a language learner, being able to articulate these breaks, these moments of sustenance, is crucial for workplace socialization.
Oh, because you're actually interacting with people.
Exactly. We do not just work in a vacuum. We interact. The primary way adults in a new environment build rapport is through these micro-interactions.
Yeah, you don't just work with people. You ask them where they are going for lunch.
Exactly. You ask if they brought a sandwich or if they want to escape the office for an hour.
That is how you actually survive in an office environment and build a network. The language of the lunch break is just as important as the language of the boardroom.
Sometimes even more important, honestly, when it comes to feeling integrated into a new culture or a new workplace.
Absolutely. But eventually, the workday does end. We hit 5 or 6 o'clock, and we transition back into the personal sphere of the evening.
Returning home.
Yeah. And on the surface, this section of the transcript just looks like the morning routine playing out in reverse.
The winding down of the operating system, returning to the private self.
Exactly. But here's where it gets really interesting, though.
Oh.
If you read the transcript closely, the words they use in the evening just feel different to me. They feel less urgent, almost softer somehow.
Ah, I see what you're saying.
During the day, We're dealing with these highly driven verbs, write, answer, prepare, work. But the evening shifts to something else entirely.
You are observing the semantic shift from productive verbs to passive and reflective verbs.
Semantic shift. That makes sense.
Yeah, the focus moves entirely from output, what you are giving to the world, to recovery, which is how you are restoring yourself.
Right. Paul and Emily spend time talking about the distinct feeling of going home, which Paul specifically notes is a great feeling.
A universally understood feeling.
Totally. Then it's relaxing on the sofa, watching TV. We get into dinner preparation.
Right. Their dinners are quite different.
Yeah, Paul is making a simple pasta or a soup, whereas Emily mentions her penchant for trying new recipes. I just love that contrast.
It is a brilliant contrast to introduce to beginners because it demonstrates that even within a highly structured, shared routine, there is ample room for personal expression.
So it's not just robotic memorization.
Exactly. Making simple soup versus trying new recipes uses the same foundational grammar, but it allows the learner to express their actual personality.
Like, are you a utilitarian eater or are you an adventurous cook?
Right. It lets you be yourself in the new language.
And then regardless of whether you made simple soup or a complex new recipe, they both bond over the universally disliked task, washing the dishes.
Ah, yes. The dishes.
Emily explicitly says it's not her favorite activity, but it has to be done. And Paul enthusiastically agrees. I actually laughed out loud when I read that part of the transcript.
It's very relatable.
It doesn't matter what language you are speaking. No one wants to wash the dishes.
It highlights a profound truth about language acquisition that textbooks often completely miss.
Which is?
That shared human complaints are actually some of the strongest bridges between cultures.
Wait, complaining is a cultural bridge.
Absolutely. Think about the concept of the affective filter in linguistics.
The affective filter?
Yeah, it's a theoretical wall of anxiety and self-consciousness that blocks a learner from absorbing a new language.
Oh, like when you freeze up trying to order coffee in Paris.
Exactly that feeling. When a beginner is trying to speak to a native speaker, their affective filter is usually sky high.
They're terrified of making a mistake.
Right. But when you introduce a universal low-stakes gripe, like how tedious it is to wash dishes, it humanizes the entire interaction.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It lowers the affective filter. The beginner isn't just reciting vocabulary anymore. They're actively participating in a shared human experience.
They're just two people hating chores together.
Exactly.
That relatability really continues into their evening enrichment activities, too. Like, Emily talks about reading a book or talking to family and friends.
And Paul
mentions his habit of going for a walk for some good exercise or just listening to relaxing music.
This is a vital expansion of their vocabulary.
Because it's about hobbies.
Yes. Discussing hobbies, food preferences, and family dynamics provides learners with the tools needed to build actual, meaningful connections.
It's the stuff you actually talk about with friends.
Exactly. It moves them beyond mere survival English.
Yeah.
Just navigating the office and buying a sandwich and into the realm of genuine relationship building.
That's so true. And then the evening routines finally conclude with brushing teeth again, which Paul rightly points out is a good habit.
Can't argue with that.
No, you can't. And then going to bed. But even here, we get a little discrepancy that adds some color to the lesson.
Their bedtimes, right?
Yeah, Paul aims for 10:3 or 11:00 p.m., while Emily stays up a little later, usually until 11:30 p.m.
It neatly completes the daily cycle.
It does.
The routine is neatly bracketed by waking up and going to bed. It creates this closed loop of vocabulary that the learner can mentally walk through every single day.
Which brings us to the underlying pedagogy of this entire source material.
The methodology behind the madness.
Right. Because after they detail this timeline, Emily and Paul step back from the specific verbs, and they actually offer their listeners advice on how to use this framework to learn.
And their advice is very direct.
It is incredibly direct. They tell the listener, try to think about your day from morning until night and try to translate it. Try to say it in English.
A great exercise.
But they go a step further. They heavily emphasize the physical acts of writing it down, noting that writing your routine out can help you remember the words and phrases better.
Very true.
And they temper this with a lot of encouragement, too. They tell listeners not to worry if they don't know all the words yet, to just try their best, be patient, and celebrate their progress, no matter how small.
It is a remarkably sound pedagogical strategy, particularly the emphasis on writing.
So what does this all mean? When I look at this advice, I can't help but wonder about the mechanical act of writing out these mundane daily tasks.
Why do you think it's important?
Well, why not just say them out loud? Does forcing ourselves to physically write down our routines actually force us to pay closer attention to the small details we usually just sleepwalk through?
This raises an important question about the psychology of learning and memory retention.
Okay, tell me more.
Writing by hand actually forces the brain to slow down.
Right.
It forces you to engage with the spelling, the syntax, and the actual physical motion of forming the letters.
It takes more effort.
It activates the motor cortex, which creates a much stronger neural pathway than just passively listening or even speaking.
Wow.
But more importantly, what Emily and Paul are essentially advocating for here is a powerful behavioral concept known as habit stacking.
Habit stacking. I've actually heard the term in productivity circles, but how does it apply to learning a language?
So, in behavioral psychology, habit stacking is when you take a brand new behavior you want to adopt, like practicing English, and you tie it directly to an existing, deeply established habit.
Oh.
So by telling the learner to think about their morning routine in English, they're anchoring the new language to physical habits that already happen completely on autopilot.
Oh, I see the mechanics of that, because I already, without fail, brush my teeth every single morning.
Hopefully.
Yes, hopefully. But if I tie my English practice to that specific action, I've created an automatic trigger. I don't even need a reminder app on my phone.
Precisely. You don't have to rely on sheer willpower to remember to practice English at some arbitrary time, like 4:00 p.m., when you are already exhausted.
Right, because the toothbrush does the reminding for me.
The physical act of picking up your toothbrush becomes the unavoidable trigger for your brain to think, I brush my teeth.
That's amazing.
It ensures the learner is consistently engaged with the material, effectively weaving the practice into the very fabric of their daily existence.
That is incredibly smart, because you are essentially turning your entire life into a functioning classroom without having to set aside any extra hours in the day.
Exactly.
Your kitchen is a classroom. Your commute is a classroom.
And it utilizes the brain's natural associative powers to the maximum degree.
Connecting back to what we talked about earlier.
Yes, returning to our earlier point about embodied cognition, the smell of your morning coffee becomes inextricably linked to the English word coffee.
Yeah.
The feeling of stepping outside for an evening walk becomes neurologically tied to the word relaxing.
It creates a multi-sensory learning experience that a standard textbook simply cannot replicate.
It really can't.
It really reframes the way you look at a normal Tuesday. It makes you realize that while actions like washing your face, answering a barrage of emails, or doing the dishes might seem incredibly mundane, they are actually the vital connective tissue of both our daily lives and our ability to communicate in any new language.
Absolutely. Without that connective tissue, the larger, more complex conversations simply cannot happen.
You can't run the complex software without the base code.
Exactly. You cannot debate philosophy if you do not know how to tell someone you are going to sleep. We have to remember that knowledge is most valuable when it is deeply understood and actually applied.
Very well said.
I would encourage anyone listening to this deep dive to look at their own daily routine today, not just as a repetitive chore list, but as a recurring daily opportunity for linguistic practice. Every single mundane action is a chance to reinforce your knowledge.
Which leaves me with a final lingering thought for you, our listener, based on Emily and Paul's advice, to think about what you do from morning until night and say it in a new language.
Oh, a challenge.
Yes, I want to propose a challenge. If you were forced to narrate every single mundane habit of your day, from the exact way you put on your coat to the exact moment you wash your coffee cup, would you suddenly realize how much of your day is spent entirely on autopilot?
That's a great point. We do move through these actions like ghosts in our own homes.
Exactly. Does the simple, deliberate act of translating our lives into a new vocabulary actually force us to live more mindfully?
It is a very compelling thought to leave on. Taking the invisible routines that we usually take for granted and making them visible again through the lens of a new language.
Something to chew on during your next lunch break, whether you brought a sandwich from home or you are going out for a salad. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure exploring this source material with you. Keep questioning your routines and keep learning.